You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and holy cannoli, is it ugly outside my house right now. It is a windy and rainy day. The rain is pounding on the air conditioner, so if you hear noise, that's what it is. I'll do my best to edit it out later, but I'm not going to be able to edit it all. I'm not going to be able to edit it all out. Say that 10 times fast. Regardless, got a big show for you today. The Boston Red Sox supposedly have a new manager. They have said that their search is still ongoing, but someone very close to the team reported that they have their guy. Marcus Morris was traded, and I talked about that yesterday, but there were some more details that came out later. And I also want to talk about a few college basketball games. There may be a little This Day in Sports History and a Mount Rushmore. I'll see how the news stories go. And I'll start with Ron Roenicke. Peter Abraham of the Boston Globe said on Twitter, quote, "Per a major league source, the Red Sox are planning to name bench coach Ron Roenicke as manager, but are waiting for MLB to conclude its investigation into the 2018 team before making an announcement," unquote. Now, the Red Sox did make a statement saying that their search isn't completed. Ken Rosenthal intimated that John Gibbons may still be a candidate for the job, but I think it's fair to comment on Roenicke getting the job because that's who I thought was going to get the job in the first place. Look, Roenicke's a smart guy. He's a good manager. He was a manager for the Brewers. And he had an over 500 record for him. 342 and 331. Now, he only made the playoffs once. And in that postseason, they made it to the NLCS, but eventually lost to the Cardinals in 6 games. But regardless, Roenicke's a good manager. He's an old school guy, which I like. The worst thing that the Red Sox could have done would have been for them to hire some sabermetric darling with no managerial experience and throw him into the fire. But they didn't do that. They went with a guy who knows the team, he knows the city, and he will provide a steady hand for the Red Sox. You have to feel bad for Roenicke a little bit. I'm sure this isn't how he wanted to get his second chance to manage a team. Forget the fact that Cora was fired. You know, managers are hired to be fired. But to get a second chance with this cloud hovering over the team is an impossible situation. And it's the same thing for Dusty Baker. It's the same thing for Luis Rojas. If Connie Mack came back from the grave and managed the Red Sox, it would be a tough ask for him. I think Roenicke will do a good job. It's certainly the right decision. I don't think there's a question about that. But it's going to be a very, very tough ask for him to lead this team back to the playoffs, especially with Mookie Betts no longer on the team. I know that there have been some holdups with that trade. The Red Sox are concerned with Brusdar Gratterall's medicals. They don't think that he's going to be a starter in the next level. They think he's going to be a reliever, which I said earlier, even before the medical concerns came up, I said that I thought he was going to be a reliever. So, I don't know what the Red Sox are smoking there. It was pretty clear to me that this guy was a reliever. He only has 2 pitches. A great fastball and a good slider. Unless he can really develop that changeup, he's not a starter. You want to tell me you're concerned about him being a starter because of his medicals? No. I'm concerned about him not becoming a starter for another reason. At the end of the day, the guy can still heal. It's a lot more difficult to learn a third pitch. Regardless, if there are any revisions to the deal in terms of other players changing teams, I will talk about it. I think what you're more likely to see is the Red Sox forking over less cash to cover David Price. I'd be very surprised if they got another player of substance along with Gratterall. Yeah, the Dodgers are going to kick in Gavin Lux. They're going to kick in Dustin May. I actually saw somewhere on Twitter that even after this trade, the Dodgers are still $1 million under the luxury tax. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, holy moly, what a fantastic job by Andrew Friedman. Now, granted, that's going to change before the season is done. They're going to make a deadline acquisition. There's no question about that, and that will raise their luxury tax number. But to enter opening day with a payroll that's under the luxury tax after swinging this type of a trade is very, very impressive. Job well done for Andrew Friedman. I do want to put a finer point on the Marcus Morris trade for no other reason than there are some more details that came out later about it. I'll read part of the press release that the Knicks released, and I'll just summarize what the deal is. The Knicks acquired Mo Harkless, the draft rights to Isuf Sanin, whoever that is. He's a draft and stash guy who I'd be stunned if he ever saw an NBA court. The Clippers 2020 first rounder, and the Pistons 2021 second rounder that the Clippers got in a previous trade. The Knicks also have the right to swap firsts with the Clippers in 2021, although they're most likely not going to do that unless Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Lou Williams fall off a cliff. There is no chance on God's green earth that the Knicks will be better than the Clippers next year. The other detail that needs fleshing out is that the Clippers will not keep Isaiah Thomas. They will buy him out, which makes perfect sense. With Beverly and Shamet, they had no room for Thomas. I do feel bad for Thomas, though. He's a really good player. He just gets bounced around so much because he's small and he doesn't play defense. You know what? He can still score. Alright, there are a bunch of point guards out there that don't play good defense. Remember Kirk Heinrich? Kirk Heinrich was a terrible defender, but he scored and had a very good NBA career. Alright, Nate Robinson, short guy, couldn't defend. Very good NBA career. I was actually thinking about this. Would it make sense for the Nets to go after Isaiah Thomas? And I landed on no, just because where are you going to play him when Kyrie comes back? If you have him still as the backup point guard, you move Dinwiddie to starting 2. Joe Harris comes off the bench. Well, what do you do with Temple? And then what do you do with Chandler? And it just creates a whole domino effect that isn't worth it. I don't mind that the Nets stood pat. I'm actually going to get more into it on Monday, but I just wanted to say that now. This really doesn't change the deal for me from the Knicks' end. I wouldn't have minded at all if they had kept Marcus Morris. He was having a really good year for him, and I've heard some people say that the Knicks can just re-sign him next year. Yeah, they can, but do you really think Morris is going to re-sign with them, though? He was just traded. He's going to be on the Clippers, a team that I think is going to win the NBA title. I would not bank on Marcus Morris coming back to the Knicks. If he comes back to the Knicks, fantastic move for the Knicks. No question about it. I like Morris a lot, but I wouldn't bank on it. Alright, there are a few college basketball games that I want to talk about, and one of them is happening tonight, and 2 are happening tomorrow. I'll start with the one that's going on tonight, and that is Maryland, Illinois. I've spoken about Maryland before, and not much has changed with them. They're still a very well-balanced team. Anthony Cowan, Jaylon Smith, and Aaron Wiggins are having really, really good seasons. They're still a fantastic defensive team. They're only allowing 61.7 points per game. That is the 25th best mark in the nation. And it still boggles my mind that earlier this year there were rumors that Mark Turgeon would be fired. And there were actually Terrapin fans that wanted Turgeon to be fired. Do you know how long Mark Turgeon would be unemployed for? He'd be unemployed for 2 seconds. He's a really, really good coach. Look, I understand that he's only 500 in the big dance, but this guy is still a great coach. I mean, for goodness sake. I'm telling you, the guy would be out of work for 2 seconds. 2 seconds, that's it! Another team would scoop him up in a heartbeat. You know, when you think of Maryland this year, you probably think of Anthony Cowan. And he's a really, really fun player to watch. But he's actually not my favorite player to watch on Maryland. That's Jaylon Smith. Jaylon Smith is a sophomore. He's 6'10". And he's averaging a double-double. Just barely, though. 15.2 points per game and 10 rebounds. So it's very possible that he doesn't finish the year with a double-double, but he's still a very good rebounder. What I really like about him is that he has improved his shot tremendously. Last year, only 27% from beyond the arc, 49% from the field, which is good. But this year, 53.5% from the field, 41.5% from 3. He's improved his game tremendously. I think he's actually going to be a pretty good player in the NBA. I haven't heard too much buzz about him being an NBA draft pick, but I definitely think that if a team scoops him up, they're going to be very, very happy with what they get. When you look at Illinois, they're a very, very old school basketball team. They do not shoot the 3 well at all. They don't even shoot the 2 well. They're not a very good offensive team. I know that they have 4 players that are averaging double figures in points, but if you look at their team ranks when it comes to scoring statistics in the conference and the nation, it is not good, to say the least. It boggles the mind how they're this good. But Brad Underwood has put into effect a system that emphasizes defense, and his players are buying into it. Ayo Dosunmu and Trent Frazier are probably the 2 best defenders on that team. Well, maybe Kofi Cockburn also. He's a really good shot blocker. They're a very good defensive team. Andres Feliz isn't a lost cause either defensively. Those are the 4 guys that are averaging double figures, by the way. Look, Underwood may be an unknown to the casual college basketball fan, but to the fan who follows college basketball a lot more than they should, and that is me. I was staying up until midnight to watch Gonzaga destroy Loyola Marymount. Okay, they needed Sister Jean. Look, you're probably not going to know who Underwood is, but in his 3 years at Stephen F. Austin, they made the NCAA tournament every year. They won the regular season championship in the Southland Conference and the conference tournament. Then he went to Oklahoma State, made the tournament there. They went one and done. And then he went to Illinois. It's taken him a while to really get going. This is, without question, his best coaching job, period. This game is at Illinois. They're 2 very, very evenly matched teams. Turgeon and Underwood both emphasize defense before anything. It wouldn't stun me if Illinois won, but I just think Maryland has the better players in Cowan and Smith. So I'm picking Maryland to win in a competitive game. Moving on now to LSU versus Auburn. You remember how I said that Maryland and Illinois both emphasize defense before anything? Well, LSU emphasizes offense before anything. They're a team that's capable of putting up 90 points like that. Skylar Mays, Emmett Williams, Trendon Watford, Javonte Smart, and Darius Days are 5 guys who can score like no one's business. The interesting thing about that starting 5 is, though, there's not a great 3-point shooter in that group. Emmett Williams is good, and Skylar Mays is decent, but there's no microwave 3-point shooter. Their 3-point shooters are coming off the bench in Charles Manning and Marlon Taylor. But even then, Manning's hurt. Manning's not going to play in this game. He had surgery a few weeks ago. I like Will Wade as a coach a lot. He's done a great job wherever he's gone. Was good in Chattanooga, was really good for VCU, and has been great for LSU. He's got to tighten up the defense, though, and next year I'd like him to recruit some 3-point shooters, but for now, LSU is a force to be reckoned with offensively. This house is stable, right? Oh my God. I don't know if you can hear the wind, but it is howling like no one's business. Did you ever see the movie Twister? I feel like I'm gonna be sucked into a tornado any minute. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. I'm getting my tornado movies mixed up. On to Auburn, and you have to love Bruce Pearl. My father went to Vanderbilt, so I saw him coach a lot. Every year that Pearl was at Tennessee, they made the NCAA tournament. Now, granted, at Auburn, it took him 4 years to make the big dance, and last year they obviously made the Final Four. They are certainly capable of doing that again. They're another team that's very good offensively. Samir Dowdy, Isaac Okoro, and Javon McCormick are three really good scorers. They don't shoot the three, though. Auburn only has one good three-point shooter, and that is Jamal Johnson. Even though the game is at Auburn, LSU's offense is much better than Auburn's offense. I think the Tigers will win, specifically LSU. The last game that I want to talk about is Seton Hall versus Villanova. It's funny. The first game, 2 defensive teams. Second game, 2 offensive teams. This game, 2 balanced teams. Kevin Willard and Jay Wright both emphasize a very balanced system. You've got to be good offensively and you've got to be good defensively. And when you look at Seton Hall and their 2 best players, Miles Powell and Quincy McKnight, you can throw Sandro Mamukelashvili there also. But Powell specifically is who I want to talk about. We all know how good of a scorer he is. But he can play defensively too. He's averaging about 1.5 steals a game. His defense is so underrated, and I give Kevin Willard a ton of credit for working with him on it. This is a guy who, when he first got to Seton Hall, was not a good defender. Now, he's really good defensively, and I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA for a while. Quincy McKnight has always been a good defender, and his scoring has gotten much better since he started his Seton Hall career. And Mamukelashvili has kind of fallen off a little bit. He's dealt with injury concerns, but still, you know, even when he's been healthy, this hasn't been his best year. He can still shoot, though. His shooting has gotten better. It's just his defense has gotten much, much, much worse. That's the issue with Mamukelashvili. I'm not knocking his offensive game. His defensive game, though, has taken a major step back. But when you look at Villanova, they just have 5 players that are capable of beating you on any night. Colin Gillespie, Sadiq Bey, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Justin Moore, and Jermaine Samuels. I mean, how on earth do you beat them? The smartest thing that Jay Wright did this year was put Moore into the starting lineup. With all due respect to Cole Swider, he's much better coming off the bench being a microwave three-point shooter. That's the thing about this Villanova team. They have 4 players that are capable of shooting the lights out. Sadiq Bey, Cole Swider, Justin Moore, and Colin Gillespie. I think that Villanova is going to be really upset that they lost to Butler on that miraculous three-pointer. I think they're going to come out guns blazing. And I think they're going to, I hate to say it, run over Seton Hall. I think Villanova's going to outplay them tremendously, and they're going to win by double digits. Alright, I think I will do a This Day in Sports History and a Mount Rushmore. I'll close the week out on a high note for you, the work week I should say. Alright, here we go. Time for This Day in Sports History. On this day, in 1959, Knapp Lashaway passed away at the age of 84. Now, you may not know the name Knapp Lashaway, and that's perfectly fine. The guy played from 1896 to 1916. It's perfectly okay that you don't know that name. But you should at least respect the career he had. The guy had over 3,200 hits and is widely regarded as one of the best second basemen in baseball history. This is a guy who had all the odds stacked against him. He had very little formal schooling, and his parents didn't even want him playing baseball. He actually used an alias to play baseball for a local semi-pro team. Then finally, his parents realized how good he was, and he was getting really big offers at the time to play baseball. And finally, his parents relented. In 1896, in a game against the Washington Senators, Lashaway made his debut for the Phillies. And he initially played first base. He did not play second initially. He played first. Ed Delahanty, who was one of the best players of his era, was also being considered to play first, but he didn't want to. So Delahanty went up to Lashaway, who was a very, very highly regarded prospect at the time, and said to Lashaway, "Tell the manager that you're a first baseman, because I don't want to play first, I want to play my natural position of left field." And Lashaway relented, and he played first. Then, in 1898, he was moved to second base, and by all accounts, was a phenomenal fielder. George Stallings, who was his manager, said that he would have been good no matter where I put him. In 1900, the owner of the Phillies, John Rogers, who was a miser if there ever was one, the guy put Charles Comiskey to shame, made a huge error. He assured Lashaway that he would make the same salary as Ed Delahanty. Now, Lashaway at the time had earned this. He had hit over 300 in every year of his professional career, and in 1898, he led all of baseball in RBIs. But Rogers lied. While Delahanty was making $3,000, Lashaway was only making $2,600. When Lashaway found out, Rogers upped his pay to $2,800, but the damage had already been done, and Lashaway listened to offers from the upstart American League. Back then, the American League did not exist. Major League Baseball, as we know it today, did not exist. If it wasn't for the star power that Knapp Lashaway gave the American League, it is fair to wonder what would have happened to Major League Baseball. In 1901, the first year of the American League, Lashaway made $4,000. And boy, oh boy, did he earn it. He hit .426, which is still an American League record, 14 home runs, and 125 RBIs. He also led the American League in, you ready for this? Runs, doubles, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and total bases. He won the Triple Crown in the first year that the American League existed. Now, look, I understand that it was the first year of the American League, so the competition level wasn't what it should have been for Lashaway, but look, that still takes skill to do. If it was so easy, everyone would have been hitting 400. In 1902, something very interesting happened to Lashaway. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania overruled an earlier decision and upheld the reserve clause between players and NL clubs. Now, the reserve clause basically binded players to whatever team they played for life until the team said, "We don't want you anymore, get out of here." So because of that, Lashaway could not play baseball for any other team but the Philadelphia Phillies. John Rogers got an injunction barring Lashaway from playing baseball for any team other than the Phillies. But a lawyer noticed that the injunction was only enforceable in the state of Pennsylvania. The courts ruled that the reserve clause wasn't valid for players who signed with an American League team, meaning that Lashaway could play for an American League team not based in Pennsylvania. So because of that, he was traded to the Cleveland team, which was then known as the Broncos. Finally, in 1903, when the American League and National League decided to put their differences aside a little bit, Lashaway was allowed to play in Pennsylvania again. It's actually kind of funny. When Cleveland played the Philadelphia Athletics, Lashaway went to Atlantic City to kill time. He couldn't go to Pennsylvania. He couldn't join his team. Imagine something like that happening now. Look, you don't need me to read you all his stats year after year after year. You can go on Baseball Reference and do that and see how dominant he was. Instead, I want to focus now on some of the more obscure things about Lashaway. In 1904, he got a suspension after he spat tobacco juice into an umpire's eye. Imagine something like that happening today. The guy would be ostracized. No way you could get away with that now. But Lashaway was so beloved that the year after, he was a player manager from 1905 to 1909. He was so beloved that the Cleveland team changed their name to the Knapps. Knapp Lashaway played for the Cleveland Knapps. It's like the Cleveland Browns with Paul Brown. Except Paul Brown wasn't the player. He's also the reason that there's a rule that players need to wear white socks underneath their colored socks. Because Lashaway got sepsis in 1905 from getting spiked. And the spike went through his sock and went into his skin. Went into his blood and he got sepsis. This guy is one of the most important players in baseball history, and it's a crying shame that not too many people know about him. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the 1910 Chalmers Award, since I'm talking about Lashaway. The Chalmers Award was basically the precursor to the MVP, but before that, it was given as the batting title. In addition to getting the award itself, the 1910 winner got a new car. And it was a two-man race between Lashaway and Ty Cobb. In the final two games of the season, the Tigers were playing the Chicago White Sox, and the Knapps were playing the St. Louis Browns. Cobb didn't play in those two games against the White Sox, so he finished with a season average of .385. In the last day of the season, the last two games were actually a doubleheader. Lashaway entered the day with a .376 average. So, basically, what needed to happen was Lashaway needed to get 9 hits in 9 at-bats to win the Chalmers Award. Now, Lashaway was beloved by all. Ty Cobb wasn't. Cobb was a jerk. He was disliked by umpires, teammates, you name it. So the St. Louis Browns conspired to give Lashaway the Chalmers Award. Jack O'Connor was the manager for the Browns, and he ordered his third baseman, Red Corridon, to play on the outfield grass, meaning that if Lashaway wanted to bunt down the third base line, he had to hit. This worked. He went 4 for 4 in the first game and 4 for 4 in the second game, and then his last at-bat happened. For whatever reason, Corridon decided to charge the ball and try to throw Lashaway out. Well, Corridon didn't do that. His throw went past the first baseman, and it was called an error. Meaning that Lashaway would finish the season going 8 for 8 in that doubleheader. He needed to go 9 for 9. Cobb won the Chalmers Award 385 to 384. Needless to say, this didn't sit well with a bunch of people. The Browns fans didn't like it. They wanted their team to play hard. I can't say I blame them. Ty Cobb did technically win the Chalmers Award, but the owner of the Chalmers Automobile Company, Hugh Chalmers, gave Cobb and Lashaway cars, so it's basically a tie. Van Johnson actually banned Jack O'Connor and a coach, Harry Howell, who tried to bribe the official scorer into changing the error to a hit for what they did. You can't make this stuff up. This stuff needs to happen more. I'm telling you. You want to get the younger generation involved in baseball more? Have more stories like this. After that, Chalmers changed the award to being the MVP precursor, and it became the MVP that we all know and love today. Actually, it's kind of funny. Hardcore baseball fans may know this. There are technically 2 correct answers for how many hits Ty Cobb has. Some people say 41.91. Other people say 41.89. There was actually a discrepancy in how many hits he got in the 1910 season. A box score was counted twice, meaning that Cobb got 2 more hits on 3 more at-bats. So, if you're keeping score, Lashaway would have won the Chalmers Award outright. 384 to 383. Cobb's single season average would have dropped that year, and his career batting average would have dropped to 366. Cobb would have only had 11 batting titles as opposed to 12. Only 11. It depends on who you ask about that. I learned it as Cobb had 41.91, so that's the number I use, but I understand why some people say 41.89. Alright, that went really long. I didn't mean for it to go that long. I'm just very passionate about baseball history. I think I'll save the Mount Rushmore for another day. I'll leave you in suspense as to who that team was going to be. On Monday, you'll get a Brooklyn Nets show, and I'll talk about them standing pat at the deadline. You'll also get the Jacob Valk show that day, along with every weekday. You know the drill. Hope you have a good weekend. Hope you don't blow away. You can still hear the wind howling. My goodness gracious. The lights actually flickered in here. That was scary. First time that's ever happened to me while recording a podcast. Until Monday, I am Jacob Valk saying that the best thing about baseball is that you can do something about yesterday tomorrow.